we've done all that we possibly can, because we can't change anyone else. But we have this unique privilege, and the privilege is that we are responsible for ourselves. We only give our attention to what is visible. And there are multiple dimensions. It's the multitude of planes intersecting, all expressing the one life that is forever.
Welcome to KanhaCast, a series of conversations with residents and visitors to Kanha Shanti Vanam, the International Heartfulness Center near Hyderabad, Telangana, India. In this episode, Purnima Ramakrishnan is speaking to Pir Zia Inayat Khan, a scholar and teacher of Sufism in the lineage of his grandfather, Hazrat Inayat Khan. He is the president of the Inayatiya order and founder of the Suluk Academy. Pir Zia Inayat Khan visited Kanha Shanti Vanam in 2024 for the Global Spirituality Mahotsav.
So, namaste, sir. I'm very honored and happy to speak with you today. I want to ask you the first basic question about, can you give a little context about the Inayati order for the sake of the audience?
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Purnima ji.
Thank you so much.
The Inayatiya is a lineage of Sufism that is traced to my grandfather, Hazrat Pir Inayat Khan. And Murshid Inayat Khan was born in Baroda into a family of musicians. And he became a great musician himself. And he traveled throughout India as a musician. And he came eventually here to Hyderabad as a young man. And it was here that he met the man who would become his Murshid, his Sufi teacher, Sayyid Abu Hashim Madani. And he stayed here and studied and practiced for a number of years until the end of the life of his Murshid. And his Murshid said, "Go forth, my son, and unite East and West with the harmony of your music, for to this end you are blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And with that blessing, he continued his travels in India, but eventually made his way by ship together with his brothers to first America and onward to Europe, and spent the next many years of his life traveling and teaching in the West. And in this way, a new Sufi order was born, actually the first Sufi order to be established in the Americas and in Western Europe.
Thank you. Yeah. It is said that Murshidji is who brought Sufism to the West. And I remember that. And I've recently read his book called Inner Life. And it's an amazing book. And I want to ask your thoughts about evolution of consciousness.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned the book, The Inner Life. That is a classic work of his. And in that book, he describes a method of spiritual unfoldment that involves a reintegration of the wholeness of our being. Because each of us has multiple inheritances. We have our angelic inheritance. We have our jinnic inheritance. We have an inheritance from the stars and from the elements and from the plants and animals. And all of this is in us. We are a microcosm of the whole universe. But we're also divided in ourselves. We're fragmented. And so the path of initiation and the way of awakening is the way of reuniting these various strands of our being. And so the first thing he says in the Inner Life, after first of all making space for the journey and completing all of one's obligations, fulfilling one's duties, the first thing then is to rediscover the animal dimension. Very often in spiritual philosophies, the animal dimension is either overlooked or dismissed, something beneath the human condition. Whereas for Hazrat Inayat Khan, the animal condition is one essential dimension of our humanity. And rather than simply transcending it, it's important to integrate it. So that means being in touch with one's physical body. Instead of fleeing the body, deeply inhabiting it, coming to know the depths of the rhythm of your breath, the rhythm of your heart, the magnetism that your core and your limbs exude, the light that flows on your glance. All of this belongs to that crystallization of spirit that is our physical body. And animals are very much in tune with their bodies, very embodied. So the first step for Murshid on the path is to come back to that sense of full embodiment which the animals represent.
Thank you. Shall I ask now about your work with the John Coltrane Church?
Well, certainly you may ask anything. I'm happy to answer any question. And with regard to John Coltrane, recently we had the joy of connecting with a group that listens to John Coltrane's Love Supreme as a religious practice, actually as a spiritual practice. Every Sunday, it's called the Church of St. John Coltrane. And I was in San Francisco and was able to meet the founders of this group and to hear of how important the teachings of Hazrat Inayat Khan have been for the church and how important they were for John Coltrane himself, who studied the mysticism of music and sound, a work of my grandfather's, and used to give it to other musicians. And so in this way, it circulated widely in the jazz community.
I read a little bit about your grandfather, Murshidji, and there is a very interesting subject he wrote about, which is initiation. And nowhere I have read about that subject other than the heartfulness tradition and the Sufism tradition. And I am completely enamored by this idea. And of course, the masters or the spiritual guides of the heartfulness are the only persons who have written so boldly about it initially when I read. And the next thing I read about was in this book, Inner Life. So I would like to hear your views about it. And, there are so many levels of initiation, right? So would you like to talk about that a little?
Yes. Well, there are initiations which are given by one person to another person. And there are other initiations that occur in a person's life naturally and which result from an inner opening, a discovery, an unfoldment in the spirit of that person. Ultimately, all initiations are inner openings within the one who has this experience. But some are facilitated by, some are brought about by a blessing that is given by a person who himself or herself has walked the path of initiation and has experienced awakening and who is able to kindle other fires. Someone who has caught fire, blazes and burns and can spread that fire to those who are ready to receive it. And in this way, fire spreads across the world. And this is how initiation is transmitted.
So can you, what is your idea about what can be the duties or responsibilities of someone who can be initiated, who has been initiated?
Yeah. Well, there are initiations which involve entering into the blessings of a lineage. And in Sufism, there are two kinds of entry. One is the Ashik initiation. It's called the Baya of blessing, Bayata Tabaraka. And that means that one simply becomes a friend of the Sangha, you might say, and one thereby expresses one's respect to the lineage and one's friendship to those who follow this path. But there are no special duties that come with it. And in fact, that same person might be following a different path. But there's another kind of initiation which is called Bayat al-Hakika. And that is when one truly feels that one has found one's spiritual home. One has found the school, this spiritual school in which one deeply wishes to study. And one is going to focus all of one's effort and concentration on this sacred work. And so if one is given that chance, if one is welcomed in this way, it's not automatic. One might need to take some time to prepare, or it may be that one thought that this was the link, but really was just a passing idea. And so that's why this initiation isn't always given. It's given when it's meant to be, when it's very serious, when it's very real. And when it is given, then what it means is that one has entered into this stream now. My grandfather described it as being like a tool that is plugged into an outlet. And when you're plugged in, you light up. You're connected with the source of electricity. So being plugged into that stream means that all of the grace, all of the barakat, all of the awakening that has flowed down through the generations from being after being, each initiating the one who came after, one is linked up with this tremendous wave. And this is what is so marvelous about initiation, is it carries you beyond the limitations of your own egoic identity. Because awakening isn't merely something that we undertake in isolation. In fact, the whole meaning of awakening is that we awaken to what is beyond our separate selfhood. So what brings us to that awakening beyond separation? A wave which is united with multiple beings who are undertaking the same realization of oneness.
So after being connected to this ultimate source, and like you said, when the barka is flowing and when you're opened up to this ultimate reality, how can such souls contribute more to the evolution of consciousness of the multitude?
The best contribution that anyone can make, first and foremost, is to be what one wishes to see in the world, to embody it, to live it. If we wish for peace in the world, our first calling is to find peace in ourselves and live that way. And we can be sure that in this way, we've done all that we possibly can, because we can't change anyone else. But we have this unique privilege, and the privilege is that we are responsible for ourselves. We can actually choose our thoughts and choose our words and choose our actions. And so to take that choice very seriously and to align our choices with our highest vision of beauty and truth, this is the way to offer to the world the service for which we were born.
I'm trying to articulate it. So I thought when we are already a good version of ourselves, we get initiated. So you suggested that after being initiated, we continue to become better and better versions of ourselves and continue to be that better versions of ourselves and continue to be the change we wish to see.
Well, I'll say better. I don't know if I want to use the word better. I want to say more whole, that we've become fragmented, and it's a question of putting back together the parts. Body, mind, heart, soul, creating linkages so that all of these faculties function as one entity, because this universe is one reality of body, mind, and soul, and each of us is a microcosm of that unity. But too often we live in a flatland. We only give our attention to what is visible. And there are multiple dimensions. And so too often the dimension of soul, that dimension of life where all is experienced as a spiritual union, a union between living lights that commune through presence, that level is completely overlooked because we're preoccupied with formalities. We also miss the dimension of the heart, which is where there's a resonance and where the deepest feelings of our existence are facts, just as concrete as this table or this chair. And in fact, those currents of the heart's emotion create landscapes that endure even after physical objects crumble away. But neither should we disregard this physical world or regard it as something fallen and unworthy. The physical world is a crystallization of the inner worlds, and the soul wished to manifest in this way and to take on this body. But in the course of its incarnation, it forgot itself, it lost itself. And we came to think of ourselves as simply this which has this outline. And so the first thing to do is to blur the outline. We think that our body ends here. Our vision is a wonderful thing, but it only goes so far. We only see certain frequencies of light. And our breath, for instance, continues to flow far beyond the enclosure of our lungs. We're at this moment breathing together, interbreathing. We're exchanging light also. The body exudes illumination, magnetism. Our thoughts travel and enter the minds of others. So there's tremendous interchange, and the boundary of what we call this self is by no means as fixed and static as we assume. And when we start to rediscover this dynamism and this interconnectedness, it will take us beyond our preconceived egoic boundaries. It will open up our capacity for empathy, and it will disclose the multitudinous vastness of this universe, the multitude of planes intersecting, all expressing the one life that is forever.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Purnimaji. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of KanaCast. Do subscribe to KanaCast on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify. Until the next episode, from the entire KanaCast team, Namaste and goodbye.